Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about apotheosis as the process of overcoming the three modes of rational thinking and exchanging them for the divine idea. Listen as we explain some differences between sowing to the flesh and sowing to the spirit. In this show, we will explain distinctions between being individualized by world mind and being one with divine mind as salvation from all worldly problems. How we think is what we become. Join the Kriya Yoga spiritual advance to get the light in your soul and experience the freedom of divine law. Swami, the title of today's show is Forsake Mortal Thinking for Divine Knowing. Now, I know we've been talking about these for quite a few radio shows, but I think this would be a good show to really break down a lot of this information for our listeners. What do we mean when we talk about and say mortal thinking?
Yeah, last week when we talked about the principle of manifestation and how things come into form, mortal thought is thought about what is manifested or the complementary unmanifested other part. It is a divided consciousness. Mortal thought is looking at everything in half. It's looking at a divided consciousness. And it's really more like the shadow of the truth. It's a human thought about what's really here. And if we continue to live out from that level of consciousness and that degree of awareness, we're in the cycle of death and rebirth. And then we're under what's called the law of karma. And the law of karma is the perfect accountant. Whatever it is that we put out is what we get back. But it's an ever-ending, never-ending cycle, constantly going from finite bad to finite good, back to finite bad. We experience it as what is commonly referred to as reincarnation. But this mortal thought, mortal thinking, creates a veil, and it prevents us from seeing the truth of what's really here. And the only thing that's here is this divine consciousness, this spiritual universe that is created by the divine principle.
So let's talk about exactly what divine knowing looks like.
Yeah, divine knowing is when your mind is an avenue of awareness for the presence of the divine, which is the absolute. This is beyond sense-level living. You're living above your corporeal senses at this point. You're moving beyond what is reporting in your five-sense mind. And you're now bearing witness to the truth. But it doesn't report in your five-sense mind. So initially, we're looking for what is invisible and intangible. We're looking for the void or the nothing. But as we have said in other shows, it's the void or the nothing out of which everything comes.
So we've been talking about some things that we can be doing to help us release or forsake mortal thinking. So how do you recommend we start doing that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand is that what is reporting in our five senses, the things that are visible and tangible, and all of the thoughts, all of the things that are invisible but tangible, have to be understood as that which is not of the divine mind. And so you create a little objectivity, you create a little distance from that, and you start to pierce through what is appearing through your senses, and you hold your attention on this wave of consciousness, this life force that is moving through everything, everywhere. It's beyond time, it's beyond space, and it's the changeless state of being. And so all we can really do is watch and wait initially, and make your mind an avenue of awareness for it, until we start to develop spiritual sense. And spiritual sense will start to reveal this divine presence to us.
Well, I see in your notes you have a statement that says, world thought is the shadow of truth and the counterfeit of mind. So what we're living in right now would be considered the shadow?
Yeah, that this world, and what Jesus had said in the Bible, my kingdom is not of this world, and that he would leave this world and go to the Father. And that's basically what we have to start to learn to do. We have to step out of five sense living. We have to get beyond corporeal sense. And we start to cultivate a sensitivity and awareness for this divine mind, divine omnipresence. And we start to abide in it. You start to develop trust as you start to rest into what is absolute silence, absolute stillness. And yet at the same time, it's total protection. That when you are conscious of this divine presence, that you are now under the protection of divine law.
So, Swami, am I correct in assuming that when we are born in this physical form, that we are already born in the shadow, and then it is up to us to, I guess, battle to overcome this mortal thought so that we can have this relationship with this divine mind?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like we were saying in the opening, that when you assume corporeal identity, that you are being individualized from world thought. As long as you are individualized from world thought, then your thought will be mortal. You will be under the government of mortal mind. And like you say, we have to learn how to liberate ourselves from that. And it's not quite as easy as just recognizing something or making a statement. There are three modes of mortal thought. We experience them on different levels. And for a good part of it, world thought is oftentimes implanted in our mind and disguised as my thought. And at the same time, you feel as if when you're moving from human intelligence to what we used to call the higher mind, this world mind, the cosmic mind, you thought that that was it, that you were now in divine mind. But that's what in the Yoga Sutras they call avidya, ignorance, when you're mistaking the impermanent for the permanent, when you're mistaking your thoughts for divine idea. And so educating yourself and knowing the difference between mortal thought and divine idea begins to give you some of the clues. at least you know that divine idea does not report in your five sense mind. Divine knowing, in some respects, is really not knowing. That you're really letting go of personal control, personal will, and then you are trusting. But in the framework of going within, you have to be very careful not to mistake world thought for divine idea.
I know you were saying last Thursday at our Theory 2 class that meditation seems to be something that's missing in a lot of these mystical systems that are available out there. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I even think, say, for example, in communities that are calling what they do meditation, that it is a modified, diluted format. It's just a word. Even say, for example, meditation by definition is the 7th stage of yoga. It's the 8th stage of Buddhism. There's a lot of preparatory work that must be in place before one is meditating in the true sense of the word. And when you cross-examine it and you look at it, yoga begins with yama. And your 5th yama is brahmacharya, which means carrier of Brahman. So you start out with union with the divine. And if you don't have that and you're individualized from world mind, then what you're doing is, again, just the shadow. It's the counterfeit of what this true mystical state of being is suggesting.
Well, in the opening, we said we were going to talk about apotheosis as that process of overcoming those 3 modes of thought that you had just talked about and exchanging them for the divine idea, which you had mentioned. So apotheosis is this process of the human becoming divine.
Right. And I think it happens in stages. I really like the metamorphosis of the butterfly, that the butterfly isn't born a butterfly, it's born a caterpillar. And then the caterpillar moves into the chrysalis stage. Now, as a caterpillar, caterpillars are instinctual. They do nothing primarily but indulge. And so humans in the larvae state, we're instinctual, we're emotional, and we're indulgent. Now, when you move into the chrysalis phase, the caterpillar shuts off the instincts and the appetites of the body. And I think the same is true with the human when we're in the chrysalis phase, that we should really shut off instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival. It's really what I would consider to be the crucifixion of the body, which leads to the resurrection of the Son and the reunion with the Father, which is an important part in development. But again, we're always coming back to this union with the divine. And it's such an important part, but we have to start to understand that we don't have to create divine wisdom. Divine wisdom is there. Divine creation is done. It's here. It's right now. It's fulfilled. And it is unchanging, permanent. But what we do have to do is we must remove the obstructions. And what we're finding is that these modes of mortal thinking create the veil. That's what prevents us from seeing the pure consciousness of the divine mind. And then, of course, if we're trying to do this with a mortal mind, because we're individualized from world thought, we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, because we find that what we think is my mind isn't my mind at all, and we find that we don't have any control whatsoever over that. And so when the Bible says repent, and it's saying think differently, we have to understand just how radical that instruction is.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsors, so listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 1: Human Development and 8 Essential Stages of Kriya Yoga. This program is a comprehensive course that will help you get your arms around the science of Kriya Yoga. It provides a clear understanding of the goals and objectives behind yoga, along with the physics of spirituality. It includes the practices, supportive concepts of Kriya Yoga, and the process in human development, apotheosis, the process of the human becoming divine. A complete guide on how to become a human in the adult state. Get the light in your soul and experience the simplicity and joy of union with the divine. This course is available in live classes at the ashram or online with 8 videos or 4 CDs. Visit our website, www.ipdtransform.com, for more information. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, you had mentioned this word earlier in the program. You mentioned the word individualized, and I'm really kind of hoping that we can unbox that particular word.
Yeah, the word individual means in, meaning not, and dividual means divided. So we're not divided. And when we're individualized by the world mind, we're not separated from the world. We are attached to the world. And that's what we mean by sowing to the flesh. But when we're individualized by divine mind, then we're not divided from spirit. And that's what the Bible means when it talks about to sow to the spirit.
So it says on your notes for today that world thought individualized becomes human thought, which is called immortal thought, which we've been talking about that. It is called corporeal sense and is everything but the Word of God. So I think that's what you were just saying. If it's not divine idea, we are in the trap. We're in this mode of mortal thinking.
Right. And you really have to start to educate yourself about that, because what we had been talking about once before is the whole thing of the difference between psychic intuition and spiritual intuition. That if you are still working on the level of mind with a small m, and you're working in the realm of thought, then you're working with psychic intuitions. And they have their place, but they're not the same as spiritual intuition. It's not the same as when you are being faithful to the will of the Father, that you are now being backed by divine law. You're backed by the creative principle of the universe. And I think a big difference between the two is one has power and the other one relies on belief for the appearance of power. Spirit is the only self-existent power in this universe. That everything else relies on belief for the appearance of power. And so when we're individualized from divine mind, we are now out of the law of karma. We're out of the cycle of death and rebirth. The Bible called that freedom, that to know the truth that makes you free. And when you are individualized from world mind, we are in the trap, that we are still in the cycle of death and rebirth. And there is the possibility of being able to change finite bad to finite good. And for a lot of us, we're happy as long as we can do that. But for those of us that want to know the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and we don't want to get off and stay with being double-minded or living out of a divided consciousness, and we want total consciousness, then you're going to have to pay very close attention to how you're thinking. and this concept of forsaking mortal thinking for divine knowing will become something that you'll develop skill with, that you will no longer be taking thoughts, you won't be doing things on a human level, but instead you will be following the will of the divine principle.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, are you saying that we have to constantly assessing what it is that we say, what we think, what we do, what our feelings are with everything that's going on around us? Because if it's not coming from this divine mind, it's coming from mortal mind, but we have to know the difference between the two. And so I guess what I'm asking is, how do we do that?
Well, just like you said, you have to be in constant surveillance. You have to patrol the frontiers of consciousness, and you need a system to do that. That you really want to be working with the testimony of your senses, because if we didn't have this mortal form, then there would be no way of really knowing how we were thinking. And so using the testimony of your senses to give you clues as to how you're thinking. Because essentially, and I really like what Mary Baker Eddy said in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, when she talked about metaphysics resolves things into thoughts and then exchanges the things of sense for the ideas of soul. And basically, that's an ongoing process, that you're not just taking things at face value anymore, but you're using everything and you're measuring it up against a different backdrop. That you're working with the divine idea, you're working with how you're thinking, and you're working with the testimony of your senses. And so you're lining up three different things. It's like trying to shoot a rifle. You've got a back sight, you've got a front sight, and you've got a target. Basically, that's how I start to see how you work this. You want to live above corporeal sense, and at the same time, you want to correct it. You don't just live above corporeal sense or live above what you think is corporeal sense. Because if what you're doing isn't demonstrating divine qualities, then chances are that you are still stuck in mortal thought.
So if we can get out of this mortal way of thinking and then have this divine mind be our compass, be where we go to, we said that that was going to be our salvation from all worldly problems. And now, I know that sounds like something that we all would like to have right now, is to be out of these problems that are in our existence. So how does that work out? What is the salvation part of it?
Well, it begins when you are individualized from divine mind, that you're sowing to the spirit. Spirit is the dissolving force of this universe. Spirit translates everything back into itself. When spirit is cause, creation is perfect. It's whole, it's complete, it's fulfilled. And so by letting divine mind take over the scientific government of your body, your being, then you're being individualized by the perfection of being. And that will reveal itself to you on a sense level as what they call healing. It will correct all situations.
So I've also heard the phrase Father's house. Is that synonymous with this level of consciousness that you're talking about?
Yeah, the term Father's house is really divine consciousness. When you see the word house in the Bible, it usually means consciousness. And say, for example, the whole story of the prodigal son who left the father's house, which is basically what we do when we are individualized by world mind. The whole thing of returning back to the father's house is separating from world thought and then reconnecting ourselves to divine mind.
So I know you're talking about that we're either individualized from the world mind or individualized from divine mind. So that sounds like what we've talked before about principles. And I wonder if maybe we can delve deeper into that word and what it means here.
Well, I think what we're really looking at, and I always think about that paper that Henry David Thoreau did, Life Without Principle. Today now, since we've been studying Christian Science and some of the new ideas that have infiltrated our thinking, life without principle now is interpreted as death, because we're talking about life without the divine idea. It's life without being individualized from spirit. You're kind of like the dummy trying to live without the ventriloquist at that point. You're now accepting a lifespan. And we're either individualized from world thought or we're individualized from divine mind. And only Christ or the divine idea is individualized by divine mind. And principle here means divine idea. And the thoughts originating from the Father's house or divine mind are divine ideas.
So I know people think that, well, we're already spiritual. We already have this divinity within us. And I think that's true to a certain point, but I still think that we have to knock on the door and let this divine presence in. So I guess I'm asking you, how do we go about to make that happen?
First of all, I really like the statement that we use in yoga, namaste, that I bow to the divinity within. That you're right, we are all equally divine. We're not all equally sensitive or aware of that divinity. And if we are not conscious of this divine omnipresence, then it can't function in our experience. Von Goethe talked about those who were hopelessly enslaved, who thought that they were free. There are so many people today who think they're worshiping God, but are unconscious to this divine omnipresence, and as a result, they're not under the protection of divine law. And that's when it becomes complicated.
Well, that was going to be my next question for you, because we said get the light in your soul and experience the freedom of divine law. And I was going to ask you just exactly that, is that we think that we're free, but the kind of freedom that we're talking about here, I think it might be different than what most people would associate that word to mean.
Right. Well, here the freedom we're talking about is freedom from the cycle of death and rebirth. We are free from mortal belief, mortal thought, mortal concepts. The only way that you can do that is to assume spiritual identity. You can't be spiritual and material. You're either one or the other. And when you realize that what is appearing in your five senses is just a thought about what's really here, it kind of gives you a little better template to work with.
Yeah, and again, I think there's that position that we have where we do want to be spiritual, but we still have to live in the world.
Well, I think what happens, you realize that there is no world. That when everything translates back into spirit, everything now is revealed as the divine creation, then you're walking in the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Well, this is a good place we need to start breaking down our show for today. So listeners, please visit the website, www.ipdtransform.com. And then once you're there on the homepage, you'll see a fading banner. When that clicks on to Blog Talk Radio Show, you just click that on. That's going to bring you to the Blog Talk Radio Show catalog page. And then also under the products tab, you go to online classes. You'll be able to access Swami's free Wednesday noon seminars, as well as our Sunday 9 a.m. yoga class. So with that, Swami, do you have any other final thoughts about today's program?
Well, I would like to encourage everybody to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience the freedom of divine law. And with that, namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda. We'll be signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.